HBCU Digest Radio, Digest After Dark. Welcome back to Conversation with Young Alumni of Historically Black Colleges and Universities. We got Or's the Morganites, Laurel from A&T, Line Brother Katie, Winston getting them into school, and Tiff about to be thrown off the show. Everybody fully vaccinated. So kudos for that. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for doing your part. Let's get into tonight's topic. The first one I want to kick off with is A&T. More than $180 million raised over the course of an 8-year capital campaign. The majority of that in the first 5 years. Even if you took out the Mackenzie Scott gift, you still have well over $40-50 million over the goal. And you have what is believed to be the highest grossing capital campaign by a public HBCU in history. Now we say this, and this is good news. I think it's no shade to A&T before we kick to Laurel, that as we speak, as A&T completes this, Spelman is in the midst of a $250 million campaign, which they have already halfway reached the goal, and have a couple more years before they get to their finish line. So you're talking about a substantial run of philanthropy for HBCUs that started in earnest before we had George Floyd, before we had the pandemic, that are being successful without some of those large and historic gifts that you're getting from alumni and from corporations. Do you feel that this is obviously it's a great moment for the sector, but do you feel it's something that translates over to other institutions, or is it one of those conversations that we often have where this is for the bigger schools, the A&Ts, the Morehouses, the Spelmans, the Howards? Is this something that's transformational for the whole culture? Laurel, is your school? We'll start with you.
I mean, as much as I hate to quote them because I really hate this new tagline, but
Aggies do.
I hate it. Whoever wrote it, no disrespect, but it's not giving what needs to be gave. But anyway, I think that, I don't know. I would agree that I think just from what I've seen so far, I think the bulk of donations are going to larger schools, and you can get into the mechanics of why that is: bigger alumni base, more alumni that actually have money to give, better networks, things like that. But I think I mentioned in one of our past episodes, like with Lemoyne Owen, like they're not a big school at all, but because of big donations that went to, like, I think they saw the Morehouse Clark gift that happened over the summer, and the Chamber of Commerce in Memphis saw that and was like, oh, well, what can we do? Who can we donate to in the same vein? And so they gave $40 million. So again, but that depends on the school, their network, what their community is like. Like in some schools in some states, I don't think that who's around them is going to be doing that like a Mississippi or Alabama, because they have other things like terrorizing trans kids. So I don't know if they're going to be thinking about that, but I would hope that even if these schools don't get a Mackenzie Scott, etc. gift, maybe they might get some Melinda Gates divorce money. Who knows? 5 years divorce settlement. Okay, the alimony is giving. I'm just saying.
No,
I think
the Bezos effect.
Hey, I mean, anything can happen. We've already seen 2020, 2021 is delivering in the same vein. Anything can happen. So I wouldn't say never. I would just say for the smaller schools, they kind of have a bigger mountain to climb with getting those donations that A&T doesn't.
I don't even know if it's a smaller schools too. I think, like you said, Laura, based on location. So like Lemoyne Owen is in Memphis, so there's opportunities, maybe a Harris Stowe, maybe somebody in St. Louis is going to be like, was worth investing in Harris Stowe. You know what I mean? So I think I think location probably plays a major role, and maybe more so than even just the size of school, just like where you are geographically.
Just saw Johnson C. Smith get $1 million from Wells Fargo. So they're based out of Charlotte. So it's possible that, even if in a good faith gesture, hey, we're going to donate to the local HBCU. So it appears that it will work well for small schools. But and Katie and Ors, I'll throw this one to you. But what if you're a small school that's in a heavily concentrated HBCU orbit? So, for example, in Baltimore, we got 2. In Carolina, you got many HBCUs. Most of them, or a good number of them, private, and they're getting gifts, but they're not getting $50 million at a clip. So, what does it say if someone's looking at an HBCU giving opportunity And the question is, okay, should I pick A&T or Bennett? Or should I pick Shaw or, North Carolina Central? Then what happens?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Katie.
So for me, that's where programming comes into play, right? What is your HBCU offering that would suggest you deserve these large gifts? If your programming is in line with the economy of today or the job need of today, then I could give you some money. Maybe you don't need every HBCU, like you say, no HBCU is financially solvent. But you don't need the size of gift that Morgan gets, but you need something in that we could put towards your own prosperity,
right,
and what prosperity looks like to you. So it just depends on the programming. For my school is Coppin, right? We were a teacher college. Teachers broadly don't make a ton of money in comparison to, let's say, other professions. Let's just say other professions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially the bigger professions in healthcare, tech, etc. But they push out a lot of educators. So why not donate in a way that helps them push out more educators? So again,
you're making an excellent point, because to your point, yes, maybe you don't have the programming that'll give you an engineer or give you a somebody who will get elected to Congress or something like that. Maybe you could, but other schools have demonstrated otherwise. But Coppin, Fayetteville State, so many of these other state institutions in particular do crazy good in producing the nurses, the teachers, the police officers, the school superintendents, the daycare providers,
which, by the way, are transformative professions,
especially now. So how do we, and I'll throw this to you, how do you make the case for, stop looking over the smaller institutions, because right now they're producing the professions we absolutely need. We absolutely need them in Black communities.
I think that is two-part. One, that is the bigger schools do cannibalize most of the philanthropy in those states. Morgan, obviously, in Maryland, A&T, North Carolina, even in Texas, it's PV far more than it is with TSU. Though TSU does get a lot of money from their law school alumni, so they do kind of have a somewhat balance, but PV has better leadership. So I think that what the schools have to do, they have to position themselves in a way to feed into their local communities. Like, for instance, one of the biggest and most thriving chamber of commerce in the country right now was Golden Triangle, which is in which is kind of in that Mississippi area.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing a ton with growing that area and growing the ability for them to bring businesses there, a lot of manufacturing. And I know they have been hiring a good number of engineers from like schools like Alcorn, people from Jackson State. But I think the other thing about these donations is, even when schools like Lemoyne Owen get those donations, they may not get the publicity like an A&T does, or a Howard does, or AUC school, so forth and so on. So I think we have to also have a nuanced conversation about, is it about the money or is it about the clout? Because I'm sure that Lemoyne Owen and their board are more than comfortable with their $40 million and their kind of local media and being on HBCU Digest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine for them because they got the money. And I think that when we have these conversations, we automatically tie the clout to the money. And there are schools that get lots of clout that don't get lots of money. They don't get lots of donations. But there are schools that have gotten a lot of money in donations that don't get as much publicity. So I think that that's another, as a community in general, we have to decide, is it about the money or is it about the clout? If it's about the money, then I think that we can make some things shake. If it's about the publicity plus the money, then we're always going to be fighting against one another for our 15 seconds of fame.
That's a good point, Tiffany. I would throw it to you because you're always talking about how the schools in the sector can connect to create more opportunities for everybody, regardless of size or regardless of mission or geography. So is it incumbent upon smaller or larger institutions to find a way to say, hey, Howard, if I'm Howard University, let's partner with Wilberforce, or let's, Texas Southern partner with Paul Quinn. Like, let's get a big and a small together, find some programmatic synergy and say, let's go approach some people to get something done. Is that what schools should be looking to do? And if so, who starts that ball rolling? Because to Orz's point, every school is out for itself. Every school got to provide scholarships and build endowment for itself. So who starts the conversation about how do we put things together to split a pot of money? Cue the dramatic pause. All right, this is more than dramatic.
I'm not being dramatic. I'm choosing my words very carefully. There is no HBCU that is in a space to function as if they are totally independent. Each and every one of our institutions is dependent on the federal government, the state government. Each and every one of our institutions, we think we're competing against each other. We're not each other's competition. Everybody else that's not an HBCU is our competition. And for us to come together, it's not a big reaching to a little or a little reaching out to a big. It's us coming together with that in mind, that it really is us against the world. It is. It should be all money in, no money out mindset against everybody else. Because the reality is, well, if we don't adopt that type of mindset, we really won't be here. There won't be bigs reaching to littles because there won't be any littles. And the bigs will probably become out of reach. And we're supposed to be the most accessible. Mm-hmm. We won't continue to exist and to be accessible if we don't realize that brother, sister, HBCU, brother, sister, president, we actually have to be family. And that means for those of us who have certain skill sets, we lend those to our brother or our sister. You go to who you know can handle your business, with the understanding that anybody outside of the family is not somebody that you seek first. Wow, when you have everybody in your family that can do what you need done.
I agree with that, but I would say that every school, and more particular, every president and every board got an obligation to that institution, right? It would be nice if you saw, and they have a lot of synergy, Morehouse, Clark, and Spelman. They got all the synergy in the world that you can expect from a consortium. At the same time, they all got their own institutional debt. They all have their own faculty and staff payrolls. So at a certain point, I think
true. But what is collective work and responsibility?
We got to take care of home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fine. But what is collective work and responsibility? You do take care of home when you take care of somebody else's problem. You do. Everybody will get counted in the head count. Everybody will receive their money. Just it's a matter of when you'll receive your monies.
I see your point though.
Like
it's like take it to the black. Just think about the black family, right? Just listening to a different podcast the other day. Black people are more likely to borrow from the 401k than other races and cultures, right? And that's because we're more likely trying to pull somebody out of poverty with us, or save somebody from losing a home and stuff like that. And so if we just got ahead of that, right, and stop having to dip into our savings and build together as opposed to building separately, we might see more success across the board, right? It's macro and microeconomics in a nutshell, if you ask me.
So that would then beg the question of, do we put more strength behind organizations like Thurgood Marshall College Fund, United Negro College Fund, because they get those big gifts and then they disperse them to every institution? Is that the solution?
Gatekeepers at the same time.
I was about to say that. I was about to say this week in particular, and Winston knows this because we've been dealing with students all week. One student, I'm helping her get to the HBCU that she wants to go to. If she cannot get into the summer bridge program at the HBCU that she wants to go to, I told her, then you need to look at another HBCU that has a summer bridge program that is also accredited by the same accrediting body, because you're going to be taking classes. You need for those classes to transfer. They're more likely to transfer to where you ultimately want to be. So that student is going to count at that one HBCU. If she decides to stay there and not go where she wants to go, okay, fine. But if she decides to transfer those credits earned at the summer bridge program, she would have paid one HBCU. And then if she stays, okay, she keeps paying. But if she goes, she's paying to be a student there too. That's literally how you need to think about how to get students and how to get them where they want to be.
You're seeing more of that, more of those pipelines to say, oh, here's a 3+2. Here's preferred admission. If you go to this HBCU, then we'll let you in for graduate school, medical school. So you are starting to see that. And I hope that paired with this increased attention and this increased philanthropy, that it jumpstarts that kind of stuff, where people coming out of high school, high achieving, yet to realize their potential, are saying, yo, if I go to Coppin, I can go to Morgan for that, and I can put some credentials together and be on my way. So I'm hoping that is something that I'm hoping that it jumpstarts that way. But it actually leads into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the Biden administration's proposal on support for colleges and universities, right? A part of the infrastructure plan. And when you look at the educational part of it, everything that has anything to do with HBCUs is evenly split with MSIs. And so I wrote about this. We've talked about it before, but I definitely want to get into a in-depth conversation about it now, because when you look through the list of MSIs, you see a whole bunch of PWIs that, because of geographic, shifts and racial shifts in certain states, all of a sudden we got more Hispanic, so we're MSI. All of a sudden we're predominantly Black, so we're MSI. So we're facing a situation where HBCUs could be splitting a pot with schools that have 20, 30, 40,000 students.
Yeah, Jared, you got to say R1 flagship PW.
Right. Like University of Arizona, damn near all of the Cal State institutions. I mean, so if there's going to be billions of dollars, and the layperson, I think, looks at that and says, oh, but it's a lot of money. It's billions of dollars. But with what conditions? On enrollment or research or low income families? All that looks different in every single state. So I would ask you, let's start with the frontline question. Is it better to have a proposal, which ain't even guaranteed to make it through to Congress? Is it better to have a proposal that says HBCUs split it with MSIs, or should we be fighting harder for our own separate appropriation set-asides, particularly to take care of HBCUs? Anybody can jump in on this, because all
right. So as a Maryland resident, understanding the Maryland college landscape, that scares me a lot, because then that tells me that UMBC and the University of Baltimore, which is always in the Black, will get preference over Coppin, UMES, and probably Bowie as well, right? And so then that begs the question, what was the point of the bill if Coppin and Bowie and UMES and Morgan don't see all of the money that they probably deserve? And that's just thinking about it in terms of Maryland. I don't know what Texas looks like in that case, especially because that minority serving, remember, PWIs got more money than us, so they can offer more minority-based scholarships
already before they get anything.
It's a mess.
So they would then be attracting our students either way.
Right.
They already are. I went to the University of Houston for grad school. They are an MSI. It's actually one of the biggest MSIs in the country.
Yep.
University of Houston in their system, which is all here in the city, have almost 100,000 students. All their institutions count as MSIs. They're an R1, fully funded, almost soon to be Power 5. They're gonna join the Big 12 probably in the next couple of years. Power 5, soon to be school. With over $1 billion endowment and one of the richest alumni bases in the country, led by Tillman Fertitta. So they just got $1 billion gift 2 years ago from him, and he's chairman of the board. So no, they don't need to be sharing money. UH doesn't need to be sharing money with TSU. I mean, it's to me it's ridiculous. But again, it's how we form and use the title, because even the title MSI is extremely broad. because I think it should be more based on the income of students. It should be based on maybe Pell Grant eligibility, those type of things, because there's a lot of affluent Hispanic people here in Texas who only check Hispanic for the money. They may view themselves as white, but they check Hispanic. I'm just saying, it's very, very well known.
No, but he's right.
In Texas,
California, also
Mexico, so in Florida. So I mean, again, you schools like UCF, schools like UH, Cal schools. I mean, they're all going to get this money, and they're going to sit there with their majority white, powerful alumni.
Oh, the feds cut him off.
Dang.
He was going. The feds got him.
Got him.
Well, I can jump in and say that one, this is par for the course. Two, this is what government does. They don't look at details. They just want a 10-point answer. Ask you for a report. Ask for a report just to not read it anyway and still ask you the same question. That's what they do. But beyond this, them flattening the money makes sense when you see how they try to flatten. So it's funny how MSIs and HBCUs are both federally designated terms, and you're trying to conflate the two, and they're not the same. It's the same reason why what Ors was saying in HSI, I've had people that are Latino just talking about HBCUs, and they didn't know like all of the background history, but they knew it generally. And they were saying, yeah, like we've talked to people that are higher ups in government, and, you know, they're just throwing around HSI and then inserting HBCU as if they're the same, when like an HSI, the only thing that makes it a HSI is literally population, not history, not culture, not whoever the president is, not who's in administration. And so they were like, yeah, we really wish that our, you know, I forgot what school they were at, but she was saying, I wish our school was like how Howard is, because I can see that Howard means something to you when you're here. And she's like, I'm not Black, but I can see that, okay, it's intentional. At HSI, it's like, that's just on the paperwork.
It just happens to be a number of you here, to the point
when I'm walking around, it's basically Ohio State.
Right.
And we're just to the border, and that's it. It's not
UCLA announced December of last year that their goal is to be classified as an MSI by 2025. That they want, which suggests that when you look at the federal designation, HBCUCLA, 5% Black. But it is to say, like, and Laurel, you make a critical point, because the HBCU federal designation and all of its funding lines will never change. You can never add more schools to that.
Right.
That's it. There will be no more HBCUs. I mean, that's it. The only thing all we can do is fall off, but we can add more MSIs.
Right.
UCLA can do it. North Carolina says we want to admit more Black and brown and low income students.
And that's
you can have a whole bunch of MSIs.
That's a fascinating conversation in itself. If you understand the landscape of America is changing a bit as the white population is steadily decreasing. And so then that begs the question, are you then going to put HBCUs and the black people as a culture against Hispanics just for the sake of designation and finding money?
No, they're just going to flatten HBCUs into predominantly Black institutions.
But think about it. Think about the schools that are around us. And Eric, I'm going to kick it to you next. How many predominantly white institutions do we have? And Eric, you and I have gone back and forth about this, where it's like, yo, we like an HBCU in here. Towson, I just think of Maryland. Towson, University of Maryland, Black students all up in there. At what point do both of those schools become MSIs?
That's gonna take a while.
But it only takes about 10 to 25% of your student body.
I just want to know why.
And to your point about enrollment, because white population is going down, Black and brown population is going up. The trends would suggest this ain't that difficult. When all you have to do is let them in. You don't have to nurture them. You don't have to graduate them. You just got to let them in. Right?
It bothers me how, like, even the standard for MSI just kind of follows, like, the bare, like, you know how we joke sometimes, joke about, white men doing the bare minimum and getting all the praise.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we talk about MSIs is like the same thing. It's like, oh, look at my Black friend over here. So now you're going to get increased funding because you have a Black student over here. Like, that's it. It's nothing else. It'll ridiculous.
Winston funny.
I don't even know how you can even add on to everything that's already been said. Like it's already been said as is, but it's like you're getting extra funding for doing the bare minimum. So I had to look at it from a policy standpoint. I'm looking at the parties. On one end, you got one party that decides like, oh yeah, the Democratic Party doesn't believe in equity. I'm sorry, like the majority of them, the majority of the leadership do not believe in equity. They have been saying it for so long. This is not to say that you shouldn't like align yourself with the Democratic Party. That's on you. But the fundamental issue that they as a party have when it comes to these policies is that they still have a blind eye to the fact that you can do the same thing for everybody across the board, but everybody ain't at the same point. And now we're seeing it with this exact same legislation. So now we're going to talk about like, oh, okay, yeah, everybody has the same opportunities. No.
Nope.
Because you want to get extra money in schools with $1 billion endowments because they let in 25 black people for every 100 people?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're doing? Like, I don't get it. I know why, but then again, people argue like, "Oh, we can't." Don't listen to their logic on this. That's critical race theory. That's a whole other conversation we ain't gonna get into.
Hey, yo,
Tiffany, I want to ask you this question. I want you.
No, hold on, because I was gonna hit at equity, but I also want to say that it's going to take. Yeah, you might admit all of these students, but what happens when you can't retain them?
Right,
because they're in an abundantly white, cultured environment, closed environment.
Admit more.
You're going to fail, and then you're going to want them up out of there.
What's the punishment for letting in a bunch of students that are going to be racially ostracized, that aren't going to get academic support? What all you got to do is keep letting them in.
Yeah, but how long?
There's no penalty. There's no penalty for black students failing out of your institution.
Yeah, but how long do you allow that to affect your stats?
And you know what sucks about that, though, is that because there'll always be the optics of black students joining your institution, black students will continue to come. And so, to that point, there will be no penalty because they will always have a well that gets replenished.
I literally just had a conversation with an upper level administrator at a PWI at home who said, I recruit in Detroit. I get students here and I can't keep them here. After 2 years, they drop out.
Yep.
Why are you masking names? Why are you masking names?
Call the names out.
Why are you asking names?
Oh, look at that. See, now, any other time.
No, I'm only not going to do that because I'm going to help. I'm gonna fix it. And I told them what to do anyways. But like, so that's what I mean when I say it's going to affect their stats eventually.
I don't know how,
but not to the point where they'll be penalized.
You're not going to get.
It really doesn't though, because when you graduate, when you have a 90% graduation rate for your white students, 90% graduation rate for your Asian students. If you have 5 or 10% of black, so say you're like Towson, right? You're 20% black, 80% non-black. If you graduate that 80% and maybe 5 or 10%, half of the black students, you're 90%.
Let me tell y'all what y'all missing. Let me tell y'all what y'all missing. And Winston know where I'm going with this. We work with students who are less refined, who are of these streets, who have a different set of rules and manners. And so when you put them in an abundantly white, closed environment, you have a lot of things that are foreign to them, that are barriers, and things do happen.
But that doesn't really impact.
But Tiffany,
that's the cost of doing business.
No. Let me finish. You have to look at the whole picture of what it affects. Yeah, their overall graduation rate that everybody always sees, that's going to be unaffected. But that graduation rate for black students will be low. That retention rate for black students will be low.
They'll never publish it. They'll never publish it. You'll be able to find out.
And if they publish it,
people don't look. But what Winston and I do is tell them where to look and explain it to them. That's what you have to do.
But there's a bunch of PWIs that don't have a good black student graduation rate. And
you're not U.S. News and World Report, okay?
Right.
Most people,
Look, but we're not privileging that.
No.
Check those numbers anyway, so it
We're
don't
not
matter.
privileging that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter though, because the bar is the floor. So like they can celebrate when literally they can celebrate when we got 10% amongst minorities and like, wow, that's not bad. We've only got right.
You know what's so crazy about that?
They got enough.
You know what's so crazy
for
about that?
Campaign.
Hold on. You know what's so crazy about that 10%? Is because they'll look at half the HBCUs and say that's y'all graduation rate in general. So we're doing just as well as you with the same students.
We're doing just as well. And that is so skewed. That is unbelievable because
all the numbers lie though.
Right. But you don't, when that dropout rate or that attrition rate is factored, it's never X% of these students just ran out of money.
Mm-hmm.
Or X% of these students went home because, mama said, I need some help around here.
Mm-hmm.
Or X% of students went and joined the military. You know what I mean? Because, so
or that 10% couldn't get into your school anyway.
Right. 10%, so you gave them an exemption. They flunk out. And then you say, well, we tried, and we'll keep on trying because guess what? These black students going to keep on coming.
Right.
They're going to keep on coming.
They got enough people to fill up the brochure.
And then with the other part, that we kind of maybe we talk about, maybe we don't, is that a lot of the buzz now is why black students want to go to HBCUs, they can't afford to.
Right. And that's been a conversation. That's been something they say, why are we pricing our own students out? But some of that is just a sign of the times. Electric costs what it costs.
And it's also right. No, it's also the choice that you make.
Right.
You looking at the same five schools like we talked about before.
A lot of black people don't know nothing about HBCUs. I told y'all, I like somebody I saw the other day. Somebody was literally like, "What's the closest HBCU to New Jersey?" And somebody literally answered Howard and Morgan State. And I was like, "Where's the map at?"
They're still saying Hillman. They still saying
they definitely still saying.
Like, what are we talking about?
Like, looking for Whitley.
Some of our people don't even know.
Just educate. Don't judge. Just educate.
But that feeds into the next thing I want to talk about. And Winston, you can kick this off. So, in our chat, you were talking about the disruption that Decision Day causes. So this is what, May 1st? And y'all gonna have to school me on this because as I told y'all, I don't know what Decision Day is. Because when I was coming up, it was you went to school and the church announced it and it may get in the PG Gazette.
Yeah.
So as a high school teacher, Like you might have made the deadline for the PG Gazette. So what I'm saying is, what is Decision Day? We see the photo shoots and all that, but you've looked at it from a logistics standpoint about students getting boxed in on a decision that may or may not fit. Talk a little bit more about it.
So yeah. Oh no.
You go, Winston.
Yeah. So this date that they put, I think like Tiff said, I think it was 2015 with Michelle Obama. They put this initiative to celebrate, regular students, quote unquote, like they do athletes. And so they put this whole initiative behind, May 1st is when you announce your decision on where you're going to college, and everybody gets to celebrate you and give you your flowers and all of that good stuff. But the unfortunate part of that conversation is that a lot of our young people have not been privy to the process of getting to college, right? Like sometimes a lot of them, it doesn't even become a real thing until senior year. Whereas some other communities, it is a conversation and journey that begins in 8th grade. They start taking ACT and SAT prep in 8th grade, and they already got their top 3 schools by senior year. They applied all those 3, and then it's easy to make a decision about 3. Where our young people are more like, okay, it's senior year, we got to get on the ball. You got to get your grades up. You need to, prepare to take this test, and you got to apply to schools. And so then we're applying to schools in the middle of senior year, and then all of a sudden, life happens, things happen. We know, going through that process, especially being a minority in this country, and then all of a sudden we're at close to this May 1st. Then it's like, oh my God, I got to make a decision. It's like, wait a minute, have we really thought about, have we gone through the process the way we need to? But what makes sense for you, what schools you can afford, what you want to study, what environment you need, all these things. But instead I'm caught up in, I got to get my balloons tight. I got to have my color scheme. I got to get grown. I got to do all these other things for theatrics. And it's like, well, wait a minute though. Have we really figured out what makes sense for you? I don't think we've taken the time to figure out what makes sense for you. And now we're in this, I got to pay a deposit. And the reality is, the reality is that this is more about the schools being able to say, we got this enrollment coming in this fall, than it is about making the decision May 1st not being the best thing. It's only a best thing for those institutions who can say, we got 5,000 coming this year. We got 8,000 that are coming this year, as opposed to saying we're getting the quality students we want. These young people are matriculating to the best institutions for them. It becomes more of a celebratory thing for the institutions, and they plug the kids and the young people in on it. And then we get in messes of people, saying they're paying deposits for multiple schools because maybe you pay for Howard, and all of a sudden you find out you don't have Howard money, and now you got to pivot and you going to Eastern Michigan, or you going to Claflin or wherever it is, because you didn't end up where you thought you were going to end up.
Or Howard didn't write you back.
Howard didn't write you back to September when you was already enrolled, and said you could
Howard
come
didn't
now.
call you back.
The email didn't go through. They didn't get it. Sorry.
Howard got 29,000 applications. They can't go through all them.
It's real.
Tiffany, are you going to defend Howard not calling people back?
No, because they don't call people back. Should I work there?
Wow. She worked there all
He said, I'm not going to let it.
I'm not calling people back. You were muted. The phone went off mute. Straight to voicemail.
There's a lot of supposition here. So I actually like what Howard is doing right now. You can't manipulate the admissions processes anymore. Nobody can just call and try to get their friends in anymore. And that's what I like. Now they was trying it. They was all in our Facebook group talking about hey, anybody know anybody in admissions? No, we don't.
This is their favorite time of year. It's that time of year.
Nah, shout out to Howard. First of all, we are coming on their radio station. Second of all,
I forgot about that.
It's a great.
But it is to say that that's a problem. That's a problem for a lot of high profile institutions. I've seen it at I've seen it in Morgan, where you got so many paper applications that have come in, they put them in a drawer somewhere and forgot about them. And kids
no more.
Some of them
still
do.
Papers.
When they go to these school visits and the children apply.
Yes, that part is true. However, Common Black College app on the computer. The Common app on the computer. If you do a paper app, you got to work harder, and that's exactly what I tell these kids. You got to work harder if you do a paper app. Number one, you got to mail it. Do you even know how to address an envelope?
Oh no!
You have that ain't working now.
Like, do you want to work harder?
Tiffany does have a point. Because back to this decision day thing, I'm a high school.
Right. Is it a disruption?
But you guys are right in the sense that one thing we're missing is that schools like A&T, like FAM, like Morgan, like Howard, the AUC schools are all getting much harder to get into. Tiffany and I had this conversation a couple of months ago and I wrote about this for the Digest like 2 years ago about how average GPA, and again, GPAs in high school nowadays are being inflated big time because these kids can dual enroll, as freshmen, which is crazy. My little brother.
Dual enrollment is not the problem. It's AP and honors that's kind of the problem.
Because these kids unweighted GPA just as low as all of ours were.
But it depends. Ours dual enrollment, but it's not.
Minus Laurel. All of ours minus Laurel.
I'm just saying like these kids with these 5.5 GPA.
That looks like a nerd.
Like that's what I'm talking about. The kids with this GPA over 4, which is insane. But I think that also one thing you're saying, like, again, with the amount of applications coming in, the quality of student that's coming in, and the space, like Morgan has mentioned, they don't have, they are rejecting more students than they ever probably will. Howard will. Spelman has mentioned this. A&T has mentioned this. FAM has mentioned. I mean, all schools in the last 3 or 4 years, all those higher profile schools have mentioned that we are going to have to turn more students away than normal. Our average GPA of incoming freshmen is going up, but it's also improving retention. It's also improving graduation rates. And it's unfortunate because the schools that I went to are not going to be like the type of student that was there when I was there, especially not for FAM. Because these kids at FAM now are more suburban Orlando and Tampa kids. Ain't no Carroll City folks coming into FAMU like they used to.
Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing?
It's a bad thing for the culture. I would say that FAM, A&T, Norfolk, all those schools are less what they were in the 90s and 2000s than they are now.
So at what point do we say, hey, let's kick the culture to the side and do what's good for the business?
As Bomani Jones would say, there's not much of the element at these schools anymore. People listen to the podcast know I'm talking about when I say the element. The element ain't at Morgan no more. Like the element's not there no more.
Or Norfolk, like you said, Norfolk State Island.
I don't know. I just feel like just because someone's from the suburbs doesn't mean they're not about that action. It also doesn't mean that they can't contribute to the culture. Also,
ain't nobody in PG about that action. Unless you out Palmer Park.
I'm not talking about PG. I'm not talking about
Those
County.
from Palmer Park are not going to Louis.
You know, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that whether they're from the suburbs or the streets, they're still going to be sitting there like them kids at A&T was a few years ago talking about make NCAT ghetto again, when it's just like you're complaining that there's no community on campus, yet you don't talk to the person living next door to you. You on the phone. Or you hit up SWAB, which is student run and supported, and the events they put on is from what some students submit, and they throw events, and you either don't come or you're there on your phone.
They was all
so it's kind of like this is I don't want to blame Gen Z, but it's Gen Z. It's like they said, it's maybe COVID, but go outside, touch some grass. So while you're touching grass, turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, what is your name?
No, it's a real thing though.
The 2.2
That's a real thing.
GPA student
It's tough.
from Dunbar High School in East Baltimore is not the same as the 2.2 student from Randallstown. So all I'm saying is that the 2.2 students from Dunbar aren't in Morgan anymore. The 2.2 students from Raines and Jacksonville ain't going no more. That's the only difference. I'm saying that the kind of student, and I'm not saying that it means anything in the larger scheme, but just those urban centers that used to feed the fam and aren't feeding them anymore. Morgan's getting more and more students now from Montgomery County. That's their largest growing demographic.
You know what? You might be onto something just because of how geographic shifts take place. Because I can tell you, coming from Sea Pleasant, Forestville, some of the lower income areas of Prince George's County, there was a lot of us that up and went to Morgan when I was there. And now to your point, now they're coming from more affluent places. So is it that Morgan is not letting them in, or more families over the last 20 years have had career and income mobility and have moved up to better places? So they're not as many. The pool is more shallow in Sea Pleasant and in places like that.
The other element,
I think you're on mute, bro.
The other element we're missing is that over the last 7 years, community college has become free. So a lot of those students that we're talking about are going to community college first, and then they're making their way to the bigger schools, the 4-year institutions.
If they make it there,
which is fine, because then they're not in debt, right? Because it was free.
Not yet, Eric.
Not yet.
They're not in debt. They don't count against the school's what is it? Whatever that
rate.
Yeah, and retention rates. So that's fine. Because the culture was going to shift at some point.
Right.
It was going to shift at some point. And I don't know I think it's for the better, right? If we're trying to normalize all types of blackness, which is a lot of our conversation these days.
Mm-hmm.
And we want those students at our schools, because at first they didn't feel black enough and they were running to the PWIs. And
part of that, to our previous conversation, Eric, we coming to you. Can you hear us?
You can't.
Still can't hear you, bro.
Can't hear you though.
Having a bad day.
But it goes to it goes to the conversation we just had, because if you think about Coppin, for example, Coppin and Morgan we had a pretty good sizable demographic of students from Philly, for example.
Yeah.
So how many of those students that were coming from Philly 20 years ago are now being heavily recruited by Temple, Drexel, St. Joe's, all those places?
Shout out to the Hawks.
Right. So places that they wouldn't have recruited students, or locally wouldn't have recruited students from certain places of a city. They're now coming after them hard. We got money for you. Don't go to Morgan. Come down the street. I got money for you. Yeah. So that's another factor. And I think that HBCUs have to do, it's not to say that they aren't paying attention to that, but I wonder what the strategy is to counter that.
No, they aren't paying attention to that.
You think so?
Oh, yes. I know so.
Can y'all hear me now?
Laurel says no. Yeah, we can hear you, bro.
Got you, Eric.
All right. So everything is kind of cyclical that we were talking about. The online clout has created a caste within HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have, like Orr has mentioned, like some others have mentioned, those who grew up in more suburban environments, they are going to look at the HBCUs that have the larger media presence. So essentially, decision day is now leading into which schools are seen and publicized most
Absolutely.
often, which
Mhm.
means the people that are on the internet paying attention to that, who a lot of times who want to be part of the culture, which is an overused term as is, are now like, oh, I'm trying to go to that school. So now the FAMUs, the Morgans, the Southerns, etc., those grade of HBCUs, as opposed to the Winston-Salem States, the Edward Waters colleges, the other ones that are maybe the smaller, lesser known schools, those students aren't necessarily looking for those. So now you're seeing like a cast being shifted of which schools are known and which schools are not known, even within HBCUs, and which students are looking for those schools.
But
It's not going to be absolute, but one is definitely leading into the other.
Right. But isn't that an extension of what we used to talk about and in a lot of ways still do about athletics? There were a lot of people, black folks, that would not have applied to Georgetown if Allen Iverson wasn't there. See what I'm saying? Like there are other factors that, to me, and maybe I'm old and wrong, but it seemed like that's an extension of it. Whoever gets the most marketability is the one that's going to get the most eyeballs and therefore the most applications and therefore the most attention.
Right. Right. But now the marketability is not even necessarily housed only within the school. Decision day is a marketing tool.
Right. Right.
Like if you got to the point now, like if a student gets accepted to the school, they already know, and when they get a message, something in the mail, it's going to be something they may be holding up the day of decision day. Like, I'm going here.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yep. They got the sign ready for you.
Like,
yeah, but you know what though?
And it's free.
But you know what though? It's crazy that we criticizing that, right? But then we praise presidents for being on TikTok. Isn't that the same thing? Isn't that the same thing?
Nah,
in terms of building marketability.
No.
Get my president away from all these private flight planes and all that.
No, Elwood took off on the free throw line, bro. I don't want to. And hung
With
on
the team
rim.
Jordan zone. With the team Jordan zone.
Because then at the same time we talk about we want our schools to get exposure, and that's another way for our schools to get exposure.
No.
No.
We don't want our schools.
No. Yes, it's about marketability, but when you only think about marketability at the closer that we get to May 1st, as opposed to every day, an HBCU is being talked about, is being in the school every day, that's marketability. You being on somebody's mind and in their face every day, that's what these PWIs are doing. That's what we're not doing. So I think it's more effective.
I don't think they are.
They are.
I think the Power 25 are, but not the.
No.
Why she yelling
In
at
Michigan, in Atlanta, in Detroit, in Atlanta, and Philadelphia, every day there is a collective of PWIs in students' faces, working alongside their guidance counselors. They employ their own alumni to do that thing. They employ their own college advisors to do that thing. We don't do that, and that's where we fail.
Well,
a friend of mine was just talking about
A&T does that.
No,
it depends on the size of your alumni base.
No,
No,
it's not part of the larger National College Attainment Network. It's not part of any state agency. That's what's inequitable.
I get it. You're right.
That's
you're right.
where we mess up.
You're
That's
correct.
where we don't compete.
You're correct.
That's where we don't
I will say there are some schools and some alumni bases where they take it upon themselves and say, we don't need all that. We'll go get them. Morehouse got a pipeline out of Milwaukee you wouldn't believe. Right?
That's still not equitable.
Morgan got a pipeline out of Antigua you wouldn't believe on an island.
Still not equitable.
So, you know what I mean? Like,
for some reason, I believe.
See what I'm saying? Like it depends. Sometimes the people, the alumni will take it upon themselves and say, we will ensure that this pipeline is going to last. But to Tiffany's point, and she's correct, that is not more powerful than state-sponsored constant pressure
Man,
to go get kids.
So it's not.
posted up talking about in Michigan, posted up in the top high schools in the city. My friend said he didn't even know he applied to U of M. He was talking to the guy. He said, "Pull the sheet out." He said, "Pull the sheet out." They sent a letter to say you got a full tuition scholarship to come to U of M. He said, "Thank God." My cousin was like, "No, you can also apply to FAMU though. Like we're gonna make sure you get that application in because otherwise he would have been at U of M real fast."
Let's go into our last conversation, and this is something that I think continues to for lack of a better term plague HBCUs, and it keeps happening. Savannah State or the University System of Georgia today announced that interim president that's been in leadership for a couple of years since the retirement of Cheryl Dozier is now going to be the permanent president. Every single HBCU in Georgia, public HBCU, has had interim go to full time, or there's not been a search for the president. There's just been the system says this person is now your president, regardless of the credentials, regardless of where you came from, regardless of what the school says. Here's your president. Same in North Carolina. Same in Louisiana. So at a certain point, it's like their public systems and public higher education networks are just treating HBCUs like high schools. You don't even get to choose your president anymore. And at some point, when do alumni, when do faculty start pressing the issue? They did it a little bit at Fayetteville State. They did a little bit for like 2 weeks when they knew 2 months ahead that it was going to happen. And they didn't start making noise until the day it happened. So at what point does this become a priority? At what point do alumni say, this may even become a political issue? We won't vote for you for governor. We won't vote for you for legislation if you are part of a system that's just going to give anybody to us to be our president.
What state we talking about again?
This is Georgia today, but it happens all over the place.
Is there a connection between HBCUs that are thriving, who get to choose who leads, who does a search, and HBCUs that are barely surviving, who have to be told who will be their leader? So is it more often that HBCUs that are public, they do get a search? Or is it just across the board? No, this is who's going to be your president.
It depends. To me, it seems like it depends on the priorities of a governor or the priorities of a system chancellor. For example, here in Maryland, they only got 4 public HBCUs and Morgan ain't in the system. 3 of them are. All of those schools change presidents within a 5-year span. Every last one of them. In Georgia, this is happening at a rate about every 3 years. And it all depends on what the system wants to do. It could be we want to build up and merge this institution. So if we make leadership unstable at the HBCU, that will expedite our ability to build up this predominantly white institution. Because you can't get any traction under a leadership vision. You can't get any strategy going because we just keep shifting presidents in and out. You follow what I'm saying? So it could be that a school is thriving.
Question.
Yeah.
Question. Why were those public HBCUs in Georgia against becoming a system again? Because it feels like they would have been more powerful together in moments like this if they had their own board of regents for their system.
It feels like that, but I will tell you why. The public in general was against it because they wanted their own brand. I don't want to be the University of Georgia at Fort Valley.
They already are. If they get money from them, they already are.
Right. Like, but it's the same thing in Carolina. It's the same thing in Carolina. But then the deeper policy consideration was it wouldn't be a bad idea if there was something different from the governor gets to appoint everybody on the board. So what good is it to have an HBCU system or an HBCU board and the governor is still basically sitting in every seat? See what I'm saying? Like, so no, you can't tolerate that either. So, I mean, the point of the matter is we keep talking about all these things HBCUs are doing well. We keep talking about these things they need to do. And there's this undercurrent of, but we don't even get to address our own leadership vision. And I'm going to tell you why I'm really scared of this. The best HBCU right now is A&T.
That's an opinion.
Okay. And the most thriving institution we have right now is A&T.
I'd argue Spelman, but keep going.
Spelman.
I feel you.
But keep
But I'm
going.
talking about just in sheer
Okay.
size and sheer programming
Public
and athletics
HBCU.
overall.
I'll agree with
No
public HBCU.
HBCU, no public.
They got like 6 players in the
No, I thought FAMU was the best public.
Whoop! That's what they would say.
In their own mind, they are.
FAMU like
The most
come with their own
thriving
awards all the
institution
time.
is A&T. Harold Martin probably got maybe 3 more years. Maybe.
Nope.
Who's going to be the next president of North Carolina A&T? This is a school that has grown leaps and bounds with enrollment every single year to the point that they're on track right now in the next 5 years to probably be at 15, 20,000 students. But if you set that back when he retires, when he says, I'm done.
The next president will be handpicked.
Oh, he's already being groomed. Ask your brethren.
You real man.
Check out the Sphinx.
Are you 100%?
Are you sure about that?
We were saying the same thing.
Are you
We were
sure?
saying the
Because
same
we
thing.
don't. Because you would think that, but who has the ultimate say? The North Carolina system president. Why? Because they just changed the rule that no matter what your search does, no matter who your search identifies as candidates for a job, he can put somebody in.
No, of course.
He can put somebody in as a finalist. And if the president of the system puts somebody in, who you think the board is going to select? Yeah. This just happened at Fayetteville State University.
Yeah.
This just happened.
Y'all don't want to hear this.
So and everybody, and
y'all
guess what?
Hear this,
that wasn't even the pilot. That wasn't the pilot. We saw that at Elizabeth City. We saw it now. We see it at Fayetteville. So they're building towards it. We've seen it at Alcorn. How many times has Alcorn State's president come from Mississippi Valley? Or Jackson State's president come from Mississippi Valley? They start you small and then we'll work you big. We'll work you up the ladder. How many times do we have to see this before people say this is not fair? And you know who is particularly not fair to? It's not fair to Daryl Allison. It's not fair to Kerry Dixon in North Carolina because they could be exceptional leaders. They could be very good leaders and good at what they do, but they're coming in under a bad system.
You know, I feel like I remember us talking about how it would seem like HBCUs recycle the same executives. Mm-hmm. And is this just not the same similar type of thing in that you're not choosing anybody new? You're just recycling. So if a state system who has the authority to do the thing is saying, well, this is who it's going to be, then this is who it's going to be, right? Same thing on the other end with maybe privates or other publics who are taking somebody else who's already worked and not considering trying somebody who's actually new.
Just Radio sponsored by Extra Sugar-Free Gum.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, you see the point.
Cut the check.
Right. So what I'm saying is, like, that's a real consideration, and I would hate to see so much work put in by Harold Martin, who, by the way, came up out of the system as well. Who came out of the system office, went to Winston, and went from Winston to A&T.
Did he?
See what I'm saying? But what did he do? He was a transformational chancellor. He's a transformational chancellor. So you can have a dynamic leader. He'll probably go down as A&T's best chancellor of all time. But you can have somebody who, Laura?
I'm done being shady for tonight. I just disagree. But
I just want to hear the name.
I don't. Okay, not that I have a name.
That's not fair.
I just wouldn't want to limit it by just saying that it stops at HLM.
No, I'm just saying when it's you can love him or hate him, because guess what? Y'all know how I feel about David Wilson. Our number one fundraiser, our number one program developer, our number one building builder is he. Because he's in the chair.
Clout chaser.
It depends on your
We
metrics.
might as well have Curious George as president. At this point, he's in the chair. He's in the chair. So what I'm saying is, history will reflect. History will reflect. Just follow me. History will reflect. That's Morgan greatest president.
Jared, I'm following. I just have one question. Who is his man in the yellow hat? I have to.
I'm not gonna call that because there is a man in the yellow hat, and that's unfortunate.
I know who it is too.
There is a man in the yellow hat. But what I'm saying is, history will say that no matter what I feel, no matter what I say, it is true. David might be our best president of all time. Now it's close because you gotta get up early in the morning to beat Earl Richardson. But what I'm saying is it's close, and it shouldn't be, but it is.
I feel like Earl, but Earl was more beloved by the city and the community because Earl was smooth, you know, and Earl had his family out front. You know, David acts like he don't have one, so I mention every 2 seconds. Earl took campus photos with his family, with his son and his wife, and Earl's from Maryland. So right, I feel like that was that's be the biggest difference is that Earl was actually from the area. But I think you make a good point. You could argue Samuel DeWitt Proctor though for A&T just because of his impact on the world.
Could be.
Now he wasn't a better president of the school. That's by far Martin. But in terms of his impact, Proctor's name will continue to live on through the great who remain nameless. When you get
to pick, you rise and fall on the error or the success of your decisions. Look at Morehouse. They messed up getting John Wilson. They more than redeemed themselves getting David Thomas. See what I'm saying? But they got to choose. For whatever the politics were, for whatever the reasons were, they got to choose.
Yeah.
They got to decide we're going to go up, get a Morehouse man, and then they got to decide we're not going to do that anymore. They got to choose. Nobody came in and just said, boom, this is who you're going to have. You know what I mean? So, and I think that that's important because if a campus has a say, then you're more inclined to have the campus behind you working on your behalf to support somebody. Not just somebody you just threw in there and they just, we don't even know this fool. And I'm not saying it has to be somebody who's from the institution. It just has somebody that the campus has put their hands on to say, you know what, he or she feels like, or it looks like, or it sounds like you could be a fit here for my school. But when you just walk through the door, like, what is that? I don't know you. Black folk don't operate like that. The first thing we ask is who, when we want to go somewhere, who all in there? Who are you with? I don't know you. So why are we not taking that position with presidents?
Because public funding ain't free.
Right.
That's the truth of it. That's the unfortunate conversation that we're really having. So like if our institutions were able to afford to be self-sufficient, even if that means we weren't going to have an extreme dip off when it came to our student population, if we decided to make all HBCUs private, we might actually do that. But as long as our institutions are reliant, and I mean extremely reliant, on the public systems that they are attached to, the question ultimately becomes, how do we that are supporters and graduates and stakeholders of public HBCUs find a way to let the governor know, like, hey, we live here, we went to this school, we want input on how decisions are being made because we will vote you out. Like that has to be like a conversation. Like people have to move it as like to a degree, like a local political action committee. We want autonomy and choice as it pertains to who is going to run the schools that we have a connection to. Otherwise, we will make sure that you no longer have a job. Yeah. But we can't do that on local level. So how do we do that on a statewide level?
How you do it on a statewide level? It's something we got to pay more attention to it because as more and more of these chancellors and presidents leave, and they're good, you know, we talked about it with Hugh Guinea, we talked about it with Harold Martin. It's going to be more of them. More of them are going to say, my time is up. And now it's going to be a system that, you know, these states have a funny way of copying each other. If they do it in Carolina, they do it in Mississippi, they do it in Louisiana. Now you'll see it in Florida, got the same rules in place. You don't have to have a search. Then you'll see it in Alabama. Then you'll see it in Maryland. Then you see it in VA. So, I mean, at some point you got to get to the root of the problem. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate this. A vibrant discussion. We got through. This is our first episode that we got through without saying anything about Morris Brown College. I want to thank all of y'all. No, we didn't say anything disparaging. Hang on. Thank you for tuning in to Digest After Dark on Series 1 XM 142 HBC Radio, the pride of Howard University. Stay tuned if you're on IG for Digest After Dark Overtime. Peace.